Republican senators telling NBC News that they are expecting the FBI to deliver summaries of those interviews later today, and that they're expecting to hold the first vote on his confirmation on Friday, with 5 key senators still up in the air. The outcome of any vote is far from certain, and the president earned a rebuke from many of those undecided members with his galling attack on Kavanaugh's accuser, Professor Christine Blasey Ford, at a political rally last night.
What he's going through, 36 years ago, this happened. I had 1 beer, right? I had 1 beer. Well, do you think it was? Nope, it was 1 beer. Oh, good. How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had 1 beer. That's the only thing I remember.
Here's how that played with 3 key Republicans.
Well, there's no time and no place for remarks like that. But to discuss something this sensitive at a political rally is just it's just not right. It's just not right. I wish he hadn't have done it. Just say it's kind of appalling.
The president's comments were just plain wrong.
And earlier, Senator Murkowski
don't approve of the comments from last night. I thought that they were wrong and extraordinarily unfortunate.
Does that influence maybe how you'll vote in any way, Senator?
I have confirmed that I asked for the FBI to reopen, and I'm going to evaluate that when I have a chance to see it.
So that's just a few moments ago, but earlier Senator Murkowski had suggested that she would take Trump's comments into account when deciding whether to vote to confirm Kavanaugh. Questions remain at this hour about the limited scope of the FBI investigation that could become the deciding factor for those senators on the fence, especially in light of new reporting from NBC News about the dozens of potential sources who've been excluded. Quote, more than 40 people with potential information into the sexual misconduct allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh have not been contacted by the FBI, according to multiple sources that include friends of both the nominee and his accusers. The Washington Post reports on some situational awareness about that at the Bureau. Quote, one political consideration looms large, according to people familiar with FBI and administration deliberations. If the Democrats win control of the House in November, lawmakers could launch investigations into exactly what White House and Bureau officials said internally about the Kavanaugh matter. Here to discuss the day's developments, some of our favorite reporters and friends. At the table, Jason Johnson, politics editor for The Root, and Elise Jordan, former aide in the George W. Bush White House and State Departments, and co-host of the podcast Words Matter. Joining us from the New York Times, Chief White House Correspondent Peter Baker, Frank Figliuzzi, a former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, and NBC's Garrett Haake is standing by on Capitol Hill. Garrett, you just brought us that new sound from Lisa Murkowski. Take us through the state of play for these swing Senate voters.
It's really all about this FBI report, Nicolle. We've got these 3, really the key, I think, 3 Republican votes on here. No Democrat wants to be the vote that puts Kavanaugh over the top, and they're all waiting on this report. You know, Susan Collins has probably been the most open about her decision-making process. She's very interested in hearing what Kavanaugh's friend Mark Judge has to say. Jeff Flake is obviously the point man on this. He's the one who pushed for this 1-week-long investigation in the first place. And then Lisa Murkowski, who you just heard from, is almost famous on Capitol Hill for keeping her decision-making process incredibly close to the vest. She said in that interview that we just conducted that, you know, she is frustrated by the way the White House has handled it, but wouldn't go so far as to say it's going to affect her decision. So she's still talking to a lot of folks about this. She's still taking into account the fact that her governor in Alaska has urged her to vote no on Kavanaugh. There are a lot of moving parts, and really we're in sort of this mushy period right now until that report lands here on Capitol Hill and these senators can go in and view it. There's just not a lot that can be said about how those folks are going to make their decisions. They want to get into a room and start leafing through that report and then really be able to make their choices.
Garrett, is the report, is the gathering of information complete? Are they simply compiling those reports? I think they're called 302s, and getting in the process of sending them over to the Senate and the White House?
That's sort of outside my skating lane here. I don't know exactly what stage the report's in. I talked to 3 different senators on the Judiciary Committee over the last hour, some Democrats, some Republicans, and none of them know exactly the stage that this report's in. They all have their own sources. They're all hearing from different people that they've gone beyond, the FBI has gone beyond, talking to those original 4 witnesses that they wanted to. But the question of how far beyond and where they are in putting together a report, remember, the FBI has said, and everyone involved in this has said, the FBI won't draw a conclusion. They're going to present all the evidence that they have. So we don't even know if that report's going to be a summary or if the FBI is going to drop 60 pages of interview notes and call it a day. We are entirely dependent on the FBI to move this thing forward here politically.
Was there any sense that the president tainted whatever's in that investigation? The White House has been heavily involved in directing the FBI toward witnesses that should be included by basically coming out at a rally last night and impugning the account of the alleged victim.
Well, you heard it from those senators. It sure didn't help. I mean, if you look at somebody like Jeff Flake, remember, Flake came out and said he was a yes on Kavanaugh before he walked it back and said he wanted this investigation. You know, that's somebody who really wants to support Brett Kavanaugh. If he can get to a place where he feels comfortable with him as not being guilty of the things he is accused of, first of all, but secondarily of not being overly politicized. You know, all of these senators who are involved here are people who are fans of the traditional process, the traditional order up here in the Senate, and they don't like to see this kind of thing in terms of the president making this pick so political and making it a stump speech applause line. I don't know that it fundamentally changes their votes, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help the argument in Jeff Flake's head where he wants to make this a choice that's good for the Senate, good for the country, not just good because ultimately he does agree with a lot of Kavanaugh's positions as a judge.
Peter Baker, any consternation about Donald Trump attacking Professor Christine Blasey Ford last night in such a crude manner?
Oh, plenty of consternation, yes, not just from those 3 senators whose comments you played, but even on Fox and Friends, the president's favorite show, they said that they thought that was a mistake. Senator Lindsey Graham, no stronger supporter of Judge Kavanaugh there on the Hill than Lindsey Graham. He said that he wished the president would knock it off. This is exactly why the Republican senators and advisors of the president told him not to do exactly this. They didn't want him to inflame the situation. It was okay to blame Democrats for politically exploiting the situation. It was okay to defend Judge Kavanaugh as a man of integrity. But it was not supposed to be a direct attack on his accuser, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, especially since it was the president himself who just last week said she was a very credible witness. Something happened, obviously, at that rally where he decided that he wasn't going to play by those rules anymore. He got into the crowd. He got, cheers. He got a lot of applause, and it became... he went back to his first instinct. His first instincts are always to attack back.
Frank Figliuzzi, I think there's another way of looking at Donald Trump. He's hardwired to never believe a victim of sexual assault. His hardwiring has been on display through the Roy Moore allegations, through his own more than a dozen people who've accused him of misconduct. And so his hardwiring simply showed its ugly head last night. How does that impact the men and women of the FBI who are trying to present a background check with integrity when the person who sits atop the chain of command of the federal government is lambasting the alleged victim's credibility and account?
So, Nicolle, what I'm hearing is and sensing is increasing frustration within the ranks of the Bureau as to what they're being permitted to do and not do. You mentioned an investigation with integrity. An investigation that is dictated to you by a politician is not necessarily an investigation with integrity. I'm not even holding out hope for that at this point. But let me engage in a bit of predictive analysis. Here's how I read the president's attack last night, coupled with the great confidence of Republican Senate leadership saying they're going to vote on Friday. This is how this works in my experience with reopening of investigations based on derogatory information. Your client's the White House. I've received derogatory information before like this. You are feeding your client in real time the results of your interviews. So what I'm surmising here is that the president has in real time the interview results. This has emboldened him last night to change his tune and start attacking Dr. Ford based on what he's hearing in his briefings on the results. And he's passing that on to the Senate, who similarly is feeling emboldened to say, we're going to do this, we're going to do it on Friday. I hope I'm wrong, but I fear I'm not.
Frank Figliuzzi, you are not often wrong. Let me ask you, though, if the FBI would have had the time to also investigate what Jeff Flake has been talking about really since Sunday night in his 60 Minutes interview, questions about honesty, questions about a lack of candor in law enforcement and in the White House. If you have lied on a background check, if you have lied under oath, that is as damning as anything that's dredged up in your past. Let me play Jeff Flake today and ask you how the FBI was able to investigate anything that Judge Kavanaugh said in his testimony Thursday in the short time they've had. Let's watch first.
Well, that's obviously difficult to judge what constitutes drinking in excess. I'm not sure how to quite judge that. Especially for this Mormon, that's a tough one for me to judge that. But obviously, if there are demonstrable lies, if something is blatantly, if he misled the committee in that way, then that's something that is not right and shouldn't happen, can't happen. But we'll have to look at what the FBI comes back with. I don't want to prejudge what they're doing.
So, Frank, my question for you is, will they have had time to analyze his answers to questions about references in his yearbook, a devil's triangle? Will they have had time to go and interview his peers from that era and try to determine whether or not he was being truthful in his testimony?
1 week would have been enough time. Are they doing it? I don't see any indication of that. All reports are that lying before Congress, excessive drinking, are not on the table, not being permitted by the White House. So now we're left to whether the Senate is going to feel the investigation is sufficient. But in terms of actual investigation, I would not count on that.
What do you think?
I thought when Jeff Flake made his announcement last week that justice doesn't have a timeline. And the moment they said, well, you have to have this done in a week and we're going to dictate who you're talking to, I always knew that this was going to be a sham. I think what's going to be more important, and Frank may be right, you know, they may be operating off of getting inside information. I think what's going to be the most compelling thing is whether or not this report goes public. Because the Senate may be able to look at it and say, we can bypass this, we can bypass that. But if these interviews show behavior, or if Mark Judge says some really crazy things, or if there are other things that come out that are offensive to the body politic, and the Senate feels pressure because these have become public, that could, again, put Kavanaugh sort of in a dangerous position of not passing. But if this doesn't go public, then he's going to get confirmed.
Let me bring Garrett back in. Garrett, let me play Senator Corker on that question of making the FBI report public a few minutes ago and get you to drill down on that for us. Let's watch. We don't have that, but Senator Corker earlier today said that he thought that whatever the FBI has generated should be public. I think we have it now.
I suggested that, you know, I know what's going to happen with all of this. I mean, the two sides are going to, unfortunately, leak out the parts that benefit their side of the argument. And if there was some way for us to be able to present this to the public, I just think it would be helpful to everyone. I think it would help you. More importantly, again, I think it would help the American people know that there was a real background check that took place and what came out of it.
Garrett.
Yeah, so I talked to a couple of Judiciary Committee staffers about how this would normally work and how it might work in this particular case. The rules of the road here are such that that report, whatever the FBI comes up with, would be brought here eventually to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and there would be one physical copy of it on paper that senators would have to come in and review with no staff in the Judiciary office, or Judiciary staff could bring it to the senators in their offices where they would review it again without any of their staff present. So you would really just to have 100 sets of eyes on this report, and as Senator Corker suggests, the risk that then creates is you'd have a whole bunch of leaks from both sides, and it'd have to come directly from senators in this case, or secondhand through folks that they tell about what's in it. That's by agreement with the White House, and it's apparently long-standing practice here. But there are a number of Republican senators, Corker, including John Cornyn, the #2 Republican, who said, we've got to find some way to make some part of this public for exactly this reason. The entire country is essentially sitting around waiting for the delivery of this FBI homework assignment here, and to have 100 senators be the only one to see it, I think is not going to be satisfactory, really, for anybody on either side at this point.
And Elise, the president, in his unbridled grotesque attack on Professor Ford revealed, I mean, that was a spoiler alert, right? The president didn't believe her. He doesn't believe her. He never believed her. He was lying when he said she should be heard. He was lying when he said she should be respected. And he was lying when they all leaked out all these accounts that while she testified, he was really nervous about the Kavanaugh confirmation. If he believed what he said last night, and the people that were laughing behind him should know, we saw your faces. If he believed that a woman who is accusing someone of sexual assault is a liar, and he didn't believe her account, why go through all the shenanigans? Why not just muscle through? I mean, this whole thing, as you said, was a sham.
It's been interesting to watch Donald Trump show a little bit of restraint until last night.
And why is it
totally
fake? But why do we give him credit? I mean, he was really putting a lid on the most grotesque impulses that we all know are there.
It shows that he has self-control if he wants to. It shows that he does know right from wrong if he wants to. And it shows that if he thinks something's politically advantageous, he doesn't mind doing the wrong thing at all. My family is from about an hour where that rally was held last night, and my mother pointed out, you know, I thought he was here to campaign for the Senate candidate, Cindy Hyde-Smith. But oh no. He has to go as low as he can possibly go. And I would also point out that when Donald Trump is in the Deep South, he also demonstrates the very worst of his impulses and shows what he sees as what the audiences in the Deep South want. And it's horrible for everyone. He's bringing out the worst in everyone.
Where do you think the Kavanaugh nomination stands right now?
I think it's going to depend on three key senators, as we've been discussing. And that interview with Lisa Murkowski was telling. She did not seem like a senator who was firm that she was going one way or the other. Right. She really seemed tortured about her decision. And then Bob Corker just then also seemed like he was really being contemplative and serious about how we were going to do this in a way that just doesn't tear the country apart. Because these past 2 weeks have been pretty bad in terms of the rancor and the country's divisions just being openly exposed in a way that isn't all just about Donald Trump. And I think that there are smart senators who understand that now is a moment to lead, and they understand that this isn't about just a vote, that this is a big moment for the country.
Garrett, let me get you to weigh in and give us sort of a final thought, button up this conversation. Are they going to rise to that moment, or are they going to bend to pressure from the White House and what they may view now as a bridge to make it easier to vote for Kavanaugh, a 3-day extended background investigation?
It's so tough to say. I think all three of these Republican senators, and for that matter, the two Democrats who are on the fence, probably wanted, for their own political reasons, to vote yes on Brett Kavanaugh. And they need this FBI investigation for that end to come back with nothing in it. But every day that this goes on makes it harder and harder to get for them to yes. And I think the president made that even harder last night.
All right, Garrett, thank you so much for spending some time with us and for all your great reporting over the last few days. Still ahead, Trump, the tax evader, may be in trouble with this